Rihanna, you're talking about spirituality. Another word that kept coming up is just stealing.
Hmm?
It's stealing, stealing in relationship to a certain type of spirituality or lack of spirituality, and also borders, boundaries. So I want to connect this discussion of stereotypes to a question of history. Recently, Gwen Westerman, who's Dakota and a professor of humanities at Minnesota State University with a specialty in Dakota languages, questioned whether the newly renovated state capitol, Minnesota State Capitol, should have century-old art on the walls that she said inaccurately portrays Native American life and historical events. The painting, she said, depicted Native Americans as, in her word, a faceless menace, a phrase which echoes a phrase in the Declaration of the Independence, which calls the Native population merciless savages. I read about this, and the same day I read an article on the deportation of Mexicans and Mexican Americans in the 1930s anti-immigrant campaign. Until recently, I was unaware that tens of thousands, possibly more than 400,000 Mexican Americans were pressured through raids and job denials to leave the USA. Many, mostly children, were US citizens. Little has been written about this exodus, often called the repatriation, which involved government raids to scare Mexicans and Mexican Americans, withholding of jobs and forced departures. So my question is, what is the relationship of the arts to these histories? Why do these histories matter? And what do you say to those who go, as often frequently people say, well, that was a long time ago. We should let the past stay in the past. Aren't we over it now?
First of all, of course they matter. they matter very much. They are our histories, they are our stories, they're the history of our people. So we cannot say that they don't matter. We need to tell those stories to our children, to our grandchildren. We need to tell those stories to our students. We need to share those stories because they matter. And the fact that it's history, well, history is circular, first of all. It happens constantly. It happens all the time. Whatever happens today is happening in the past, and whatever is happening in the past is happening today, and it will happen tomorrow. That's our beliefs, It's a belief system that history is circular. And so when we say that this is in the past, this is not in the past. This is happening right now. It's happening throughout the continent. It's not even happening only in the United States. People are being killed all over the place for being indigenous, for being African American, for being Latinos. They are being killed for these reasons. So it's not something that it happened in the past. And the whole thing about racism and discrimination is not something that happened in the past, because we live it every day. I mean, we see it every day. And the other thing that I think is very important is that when I say that we need to tell these stories to the people, to our people, I think that one of the reasons for that is because it's very difficult for many people, for many young people, to understand what is happening. To make those connections with the past, because there is no past, unless it is not only our responsibility, it's our duty to let the people, the young people, or the people that are coming to this country from other places, what has happened in the United States before you came. I showed a movie to my students on the Chicano movement in the 60s. And it was just incredible, the response. They couldn't believe it. They were immersed in it, they had questions, they were just so fascinated with the whole thing. And so the next question from me was, well, how do we continue the struggle? What are you doing? And then it was again another thing, like talking about immigration and I mean, it's not something that it is in the past. It's in our lives. It's in the lives of the young people. It's in the lives of the old people as well. And what does that relate to art? From my point of view, I think that most of us came into the arts because of these type of things. Because we learned that there is just no way to make sense of this unless we write about it, we paint about it, we make theater on it, we do iconography. I mean, it is part of the tradition that this is how we make sense of these horrible things. But it's also the way that we share these things with other people, both with our people, mostly with our people. I think that's the responsibility that we have for. But even to the world at large, because otherwise, if we don't tell the story, who else is going to tell the story?
The thing about arts is that they vision for us our future. It tells us the story of who we are. So if we are glorifying inaccurate portrayals of the founding of this country, that's very problematic, because at that moment when that painter was making that image, it was as powerful as contemporary artists writing plays with red face and making inaccurate and stereotypical depictions of Native people. And again, it's that appropriation, not appreciation. And if you take a look at that time period, it was artists and painters and drawers that were taking what they felt were stories from the Americas back to Europe. So take a look at The Tempest, Shakespeare's play. There's Caliban, that first depiction of what people were like in the New World, and essentially it was a monster. But at the same time, Europe started to change because of their contact with people in the Americas. Europe started to change for the better. Society started to change for the better because they actually finally saw a true societies, true egalitarian societies, and for the first time saw women in power. For the first time saw gay people in power and revered. Just saw a completely different view of the world. And I mean, for instance, if we take a look at even the founding of this country, so many of the basic philosophies that we have were the appropriation of Native philosophies. And one of the facts that I just love sort of throwing out there is the fact that I'm the only person talking right now in this whole room. That's an indigenous concept that Europeans did not have before they came to the Americas. And when they were setting up Congress, they were trying to figure out, well, will it be like the Parliament back in England? And Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, they said, no, there's this great idea that these Native people, each person is allowed to speak their full thought, and then others respond to it. I think we should do that. So talk about appropriation and misappropriation. So yeah, we need to address those historical moments where we think we know the story, but we don't. We need to re-examine them.
Just a couple of things. One is the deportation of the Mexicans and Mexican Americans. I think it's important to note that there were people who were U.S. citizens who had never lived in Mexico. Children. Yes. Who were deported to Mexico because yes. Yeah. That's critical. And it's the 1930s. What else do we know about the 1930s? It's the Great Depression. At a time when jobs are scarce, resources are scarce, land is at prime value, these people are deported because they are seen as a threat to, or they occupy these jobs, this land, etc. So get them out of here, deport them. Prior to that, they were encouraged to come. I mean, this isn't the first time, the Chinese Exclusion Act and other periods in history where a particular nationality or ethnicity is no longer wanted because they become There's just too many of them, and they're taking our jobs or our land or whomever, whatever. And so, in terms of art, I think art has to respond to these. History repeats itself because we just saw another Great Recession at a time when you see Arizona's notoriously bad, racist laws, and and Alabama and Indiana had copycat laws, and people were leaving the country because of these racist laws that were going into place. And so there was another wave of migration south that had tremendous impact in particularly in small rural communities where schools were only half filled, and poultry plants were not able to hire enough people to work all the shifts, etc. So we learn, I think, a lot of times through the stories that art tells us about history, because that's one of the reasons I got into writing, was because I would go to these protests and these meetings, and they were just boring, and they were saying wah, 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 all the time, and the same people there. And art I saw as offering a louder, clearer, more creative voice that reached different audiences. And I think the challenge now, for me at least as a writer, is to figure out how we can move beyond just our artistic spaces, just our poetry rooms and etc., and really integrate art into these political struggles against forced exportation or the police brutality that we're experiencing, the theft of culture, all of these things that we're combating, and all of these things that we need to affirm about ourselves. It has to be part affirmation as well. Art offers an opportunity to do that. I'm reminded of a quote by Arundhati Roy in which she basically says that we have to use our art to topple the empire. We have to tell our stories in ways that the corporate media won't tell it, and that in doing so we have to make the revolution irresistible. And I think that that's the role that we as artists, that I as an artist am striving to achieve. And I think that we as artists, that's our highest plateau that we can reach, is that our art can be impactful in creating positive change for humanity through this upheaval of empire.
The civil rights movement couldn't have happened with all of the amazing Black artists and musicians. I mean, it couldn't have happened.